The first thing Ava Carlisle noticed was not the wind moving across the runway, or the smell of jet fuel hanging over the private field, or the little boy standing beside a dented toolbox with a blue toy airplane pressed against his chest. She noticed the hangar. It sat at the far west edge of Carlisle Executive Field like something the airport had forgotten to demolish. The white paint had peeled in long strips from the metal siding. The sliding door groaned whenever the wind pushed against it. Above the entrance, a hand-painted sign read, "Cole Aviation Repair." The letters clean but fading, as if one man had kept repainting them by himself because no one else thought the place was worth saving. Ava stepped out of her black SUV in a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than Ethan Cole's monthly rent. Behind her came 2 assistants, 3 pilots in dark uniforms, and a cameraman from her own media team, because Ava liked every business move to look like a victory before it even began. She looked at the hangar, then at Ethan, then at the old stepladder leaning against the wall. Her mouth curled before she spoke. "This is it," she said, loud enough for the pilots to hear. "This is the famous repair shop holding up my West Side expansion." One of the assistants gave a polite little laugh. The pilots did not laugh right away, but they smiled because people around Ava Carlisle learned quickly what kind of reaction kept them employed. Ethan stood by the open hangar door with a rag in one hand and grease along the side of his wrist. He was 38, broad-shouldered, quiet-eyed, and dressed in a gray work shirt that had been washed too many times to still be gray. Beside him, his 9-year-old son Noah tightened his fingers around the blue toy plane until the plastic nose pressed into his palm. Ava took 2 slow steps forward, studying the patched roof and the cracked concrete like she was inspecting a bad joke. "Mr. Cole," she said, "I run 300 private jets across 5 states. I move billionaires, surgeons, governors, and people who do not wait in terminals. And you want me to believe my operation should make room for a tin shed with a coffee machine and a toolbox?" Ethan did not answer. He had learned a long time ago that some people did not ask questions because they wanted truth. They asked questions because they wanted witnesses. Ava turned slightly, making sure the camera had her good side. "This is not a hangar," she said. "This is a shed with wings." Noah looked up at his father. The boy did not cry. He was old enough to understand an insult, but still young enough to wonder why adults smiled when someone else was hurt. Ethan glanced down at him, and the expression in his eyes changed for half a second. Not anger, not shame, something steadier. He placed the rag on the workbench and moved his hand gently to Noah's shoulder. "It keeps aircraft safe," Ethan said. Ava laughed once. "Sharp and controlled. My aircraft are safe because Carlisle Sky Charter hires real engineers, not hobbyists on the edge of the field." She held out her hand without looking back, and one assistant passed her a black compliance binder. "In fact, that is why I am here. Your month-to-month access agreement is under review. We are consolidating maintenance operations. And frankly, this area no longer reflects our brand." The binder was thick, the kind used by companies that wanted paper to look like order. Ava opened it, not because she needed to read it, but because she wanted to show Ethan that his future had already been reduced to tabs and signatures. A gust of wind moved across the tarmac. One page lifted. Ethan saw the corner before Ava pressed it down. Then he saw the notation beneath the inspection stamp. E. C. E. Say them nice. Rev C. His body went still. For everyone else, it was just a code. For Ethan, it was 8 years of memory folded into black ink. A vibration-damping retrofit package. A master inspection sheet. A revision that had never been meant to travel without original sign-off. He saw the stamp again as Ava turned the page. And beneath it, at the lower right corner, a copied signature sat where no copied signature should have been. Ethan's signature. Ava kept talking, but her voice shifted farther away in his mind. You have 14 days to submit any objections through airport administration. After that, we will begin removal planning. Ethan's eyes stayed on the binder. The blue ink mark was wrong. The pressure brake was wrong. The tail of the C in Rev C curved too high. Exactly like the master copy he had signed in 2018. Not like a live recurring inspection entry from any aircraft in 2026. He had seen that signature before because he had written it. He had written it at a desk under fluorescent lights during a year when he still wore a corporate badge and still believed the aviation world rewarded the people who told the truth before the crash report did. "Mr. Cole," Ava said. "Are you listening?" Ethan lifted his eyes. "Where did that sheet come from?" Ava blinked, irritated that he had not chosen fear. "Excuse me. The C. -17 Rev C page. That one." He nodded toward the binder. "Where did your team pull it from?" Ava slowly closed the binder. "From our maintenance compliance department, which is none of your concern. It is if my signature is in it." For the first time, the pilot stopped smiling. One assistant looked down at the binder like it had warmed in her hands. Ava's face did not change, but her fingers tightened around the spine. "You signed something years ago. Congratulations. That does not give you authority over my fleet." "No," Ethan said quietly. "But it means someone used my signature where they should have used an inspection." The air thinned. Noah looked between the adults, not understanding the words but understanding the silence after them. Ava stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to sound more dangerous. "Be careful. Mr. Cole. Men with small shops sometimes mistake paperwork for power." Ethan looked at the tiny hangar behind him, then at the fleet hangars glowing beyond Ava's shoulder, where polished jets sat under bright lights like expensive promises. And people with power sometimes mistake paperwork for decoration. Ava's smile vanished. 14 days, she said. "Then I want this shed cleared." She turned back toward the SUV, her entourage following in a neat line. The cameraman lowered his lens, uncertain whether he had captured a branding moment or a legal problem. When the vehicles pulled away, Noah stayed still beside the toolbox, the blue airplane hanging from one hand. "Dad," he asked, "is our hangar really a shed?" Ethan watched the SUV disappear behind the larger maintenance complex. "No," he said. "It is a place where we do things right." For a few seconds, the only sound was the wind pushing against the old metal door. Then Ethan crouched to Noah's height and took the blue toy airplane from his hand. The plane had scratches along one wing, and a little painted star near the tail. Noah's mother had bought it at a hospital gift shop 5 years earlier, back when everyone was pretending there would be more time. Ethan turned the toy carefully and handed it back nose first, the way Lena used to do when she told Noah every aircraft needed someone who cared enough to check underneath. "If somebody important says something small is worthless," Ethan said. "That does not make it true." Noah nodded, but his eyes stayed wet around the edges. "Then why did everybody smile?" Ethan had no quick answer for that. He looked into the hangar, at the old fan, the workbench, the invoice tray with bills clipped beneath a magnet, and the cabinet where he kept records nobody asked about anymore. Because sometimes people smile before they understand what they are looking at. If you have ever been judged by your clothes, your job, your car, your home, or the quiet way you carry yourself, stay with this story. Tell us where you are listening from today. Because this one is for the people who know that dignity does not always arrive in a luxury vehicle. Sometimes it stands in an old hangar, holding a child's toy airplane, waiting for the truth to catch up. That evening, after Noah finished his homework at the small folding table near the parts washer, Ethan locked the hangar door and pulled an old fireproof archive box from beneath the back shelf. Dust lifted from the lid. The label on the side had faded, but he knew what it said before he wiped it clean. Asteron Aviation Systems. C. Negativo 17. Retrofit. Master set. 2018. Noah sat cross-legged on a moving blanket. Watching him. Is that from your old job? Some of it. Ethan said. The job before Mom got sick. Ethan paused with his hand on the latch. The question landed softly. But it still landed. Yes. Noah looked at the blue toy plane in his lap. Did you fix bigger planes back then? I did not fix them the way I fix things here. Ethan opened the box. Inside were binders. Sealed envelopes. Inspection sheets. Photographs. And one blue-backed folder with his name printed on the tab. I helped decide what made them safe to fly after other people changed them. That was as much as he usually said. He did not tell Noah about the conference rooms. The deadlines. The executives who wanted safety language softened into business language. He did not tell him about the day Lena, thin and tired from treatment, had sat at their kitchen table and listened while he described a compliance dispute that could hurt his career. She had reached across the table, taken his hand, and said, "If you know something is not safe, do not let money rename it." Ethan lifted the master inspection sheet from the folder. The paper had yellowed slightly at the edges, but the ink was still clear. E. C. Sedemneist. Rev C. His original signature sat at the lower right, written in blue ink, with a small pressure break where his pen had paused. He remembered the pause. He had been tired that night. Lena had called from the hospital, and he had signed the final page with his phone tucked between his shoulder and his ear while she told him Noah had fallen asleep holding a toy airplane. He set the master sheet beneath the work lamp and took out his phone. From memory, he enlarged the image he had captured in his mind from Ava's binder, reconstructing the curve, the angle, the pressure mark. Then he pulled 3 old reference sheets from the archive, each one from a different aircraft certification test. Live inspection initials varied. Date blocks varied. Pen pressure varied. Human hands never made identical marks across different aircraft on different days. Noah leaned over the table. Is it bad? Ethan did not answer at once. He took a pencil and marked 3 points on a scrap sheet. The misplaced revision code. The duplicated pressure break. The missing live inspector initials. Then he sat back. It could be a mistake, he said. But you do not think it is? Ethan looked at his son. Noah had Lena's way of hearing the sentence underneath the sentence. No, he said. I do not. The next morning, Ethan drove Noah to school in a pickup truck with one cracked speaker and a dashboard that rattled over every pothole. At the drop-off lane, Noah opened the door, then stopped. Dad, yeah, if their planes are not safe, are people going to get hurt? Ethan gripped the steering wheel. In aviation, fear was easy. Truth was harder. Not if someone tells the truth early enough. Noah nodded as if filing that away somewhere important. Then tell it. After school drop-off, Ethan did not go back to his hangar. He drove to the main Carlisle maintenance complex, a building so clean it looked more like a showroom than a place where machines were opened and inspected. A row of private jets waited under white lights. Their polished noses pointed toward the hangar doors. Mechanics moved between them in matching uniforms. On the far wall, a digital operations screen showed aircraft IDs, departures, arrivals, and green status bars beside every tail number. Ethan checked in at the side office, where the receptionist looked surprised to see him. Mr. Cole, do you have an appointment? No, Ethan said. I need to return something to compliance. He held up a sealed envelope. Inside were photocopies from his archive, a written discrepancy note, and a request for chain of custody review. He had not accused anyone. He had not shouted. He had simply written down what the documents could prove. That was how safety worked when pride did not interfere. You named the discrepancy before it became wreckage. Before the receptionist could answer, Marco Ruiz walked in from the maintenance floor. Marco was Carlisle's chief mechanic. A square-built man in his 50s with tired eyes and a pen behind one ear. He had known Ethan casually for years. The way people at airports know each other without becoming friends. He looked at the envelope. Then at Ethan's face. "What is this?" "Something your compliance team needs to see." Marco took the envelope but did not open it. "Ava told us you might come by." "I bet she did. She said you were upset about the West Hangar." Ethan glanced through the glass wall at the aircraft lined up inside. "This is not about my lease." Marco studied him for a long second, then opened the envelope. As he read the first page, his expression shifted from annoyance to concentration. He flipped to the photocopied master sheet, then to Ethan's handwritten comparison notes. "Where did you get this?" "My archive." "You kept master records." "I kept my copy of the certification package I signed." "Legally," Marco lowered his voice, "you are saying our recurring inspection sheets are copied." "I am saying the signature blocks I saw in Ava's binder looked copied from a master sheet, not signed after individual aircraft inspections." Marco exhaled through his nose. "That is a serious accusation. It is a serious pattern." Behind them, a door opened. Ava Carlisle entered with Tessa Grant, her operations director, and two executives Ethan had seen on the company website. Ava's expression suggested she had expected this moment and already chosen the version of it she would tell others. "Mr. Cole," she said, "you are persistent. I brought documentation. You brought resentment wrapped in paper." Marco looked uncomfortable. "Ava. He has some points we should review." Ava's eyes cut to him. "Not on the floor. Not during active departures. And not because a man whose lease is ending wants leverage." Ethan said nothing, but he could feel the mechanics nearby slowing down. People heard certain words differently in a workplace. Lease. Leverage. Ending. Ava was not just dismissing him now. She was building a story around him. She walked past Marco and took the papers. Her eyes moved over the first page too quickly to read it. "You saw one page in a binder for half a second yesterday. Now you think you understand my fleet. I understand my signature. Your signature from 2018. And if it appears as a live sign-off in 2026, that is a problem." Ava smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Marco, show him the system. Then show him the exit. I want this finished." Marco hesitated. That hesitation mattered. It was the first crack in the room. He led Ethan to a side workstation and pulled up 3 aircraft files. "Fine," Marco said quietly. "Show me." Ethan stood beside the screen while Ava, Tessa, and half the nearby floor pretended not to watch. Marco opened the first file. Tail number CS 114. E. C. -17 recurring mount inspection. The PDF looked clean. Date. Technician ID. Compliance note. Signature box. Ethan pointed. "Zoom in on the lower right." Marco zoomed. "There." Ethan said. "Pressure break after the C. That mark exists on my master sheet because my pen stopped. It should not repeat exactly on an aircraft record 8 years later." Marco opened the second file. Tail number CS 219. Same retrofit package. Same lower right signature. Ethan did not touch the keyboard. He simply nodded toward the corner. Zoom. Marco zoomed. The same pressure break appeared again. The mechanics behind them stopped moving. Ava's jaw tightened. That could be template carryover. "No," Ethan said. Template carryover would not include the blue ink scan artifact along the left stroke, and it would not place Rev C 2 mm too high on 3 separate aircraft records. Open another. Marco opened a third file. Chu, Njolsvanhet. Same package. Same corner. Same curve. Same pressure break. For a moment. Nobody spoke. The main maintenance hangar. full of aircraft worth more than houses. Went quiet around a small workstation and one ugly detail in a signature box. It was not dramatic to look at. No sparks. No smoke. No engine falling apart. Just a copied mark where a live human sign-off should have been. But people who understood machines also understood records. A machine could fail honestly. A record could lie. Marco leaned closer to the screen. His voice dropped. That is the same signature. Ethan nodded. Yes. Tessa Grant looked at Ava. And for the first time, her polished confidence slipped. Ava. We should pause the packet release until compliance reviews this. Ava turned on her. We are not pausing anything because of a visual similarity in old paperwork. It is not just visual. Ethan said. It is chain of custody. E. C. -17 Rev C required live inspection confirmation after each mount interval. A master signature cannot be recycled as recurring compliance. Ava stepped closer to him, lowering her voice in a way meant to sound private but sharp enough for everyone nearby. You are done here. I am not trying to embarrass you. You walked into my facility and implied fraud in front of my staff. I showed Marco 3 matching signatures. You showed him your need to matter. That one hit harder than the others. Not because Ethan believed it, but because Noah had asked yesterday whether their hangar was too small. Because Bill sat under a magnet on his workbench. Because quiet men heard that sentence in 100 different ways over a lifetime. From people who thought volume was proof. Ethan folded his papers back into the envelope. You need an external review. Ava laughed under her breath. But this time nobody joined. What I need is my West Side property cleared. Since you are so concerned with documents, you will appreciate this. She looked to Tessa. Send Mr. and Cole the revised access notice. Tessa did not move. Ava's voice hardened. Now, Tessa opened her tablet, tapped twice, and Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He did not need to read it to know what she had done. Still, he pulled it out. The email subject line said, Notice of termination of temporary field access. Effective in 14 days. Ava watched his face. You want to play paperwork? Mr. Cole then let us play properly. 14 days. After that, your hangar access is suspended pending redevelopment. Any unauthorized entry after that will be treated as trespass. Marco looked at Ava. That hangar predates the Carlisle lease, and everything at this field is under review. Ava snapped. Ethan placed the envelope on Marco's workstation. Keep the copies. Ava reached for it. No. He can submit through counsel. Marco put his hand on top of the envelope before she could take it. The movement was small, but the room saw it. Ava saw it most of all. I will log it, Marco said. As a maintenance discrepancy received, the silence returned. Smaller than before, but heavier. Ethan looked at Marco. And Marco did not look away. It was not loyalty yet. It was something simpler. A mechanic had seen a wrong mark and could not unsee it. Ava smiled at both of them like she was memorizing names for later. Then log it. And remember who owns the operation you are logging it against. Ethan walked out through the side door into the hard white sunlight of the tarmac. Behind him, the maintenance complex returned slowly to motion. But not to normal. Normal was what people called a problem before someone put it in writing. At Cole Aviation Repair, Noah was already back from school, sitting at the workbench with Mrs. Alvarez from the neighboring avionics shop watching him until Ethan returned. The boy looked up as soon as his father entered. Did you tell it? Ethan hung his keys on the nail by the door. I started. Noah studied his face. Did she get mad? A little. How much is a little? Ethan almost smiled. 14 days. Noah's expression changed. For the hangar, Ethan did not lie to him. She is trying. The boy looked around the small space as if seeing it differently now. The fan. The shelves. The coffee cup. the rolling stool where he did homework, the old blue blanket in the corner. The place was not just metal and concrete to him. It was where he had spent afternoons after school, where his father made sandwiches on paper towels, where the echo of his mother's name still felt gentle instead of sad. Can she take it? Ethan took off his cap and set it on the bench. Not if we do things right. He went back to the archive box and pulled out the master chain of custody folder. This time, he did not look only at the signature. He looked at the distribution list. Asteron Aviation Systems, Halbrook Risk and Aviation Underwriters, Carlisle Sky Charter, Legacy Acquisition Division. There it was. The link he had been trying to remember. The retrofit package had not just been an engineering note, it had been tied to insurance conditions after a fleet-wide vibration issue years earlier. If Carlisle's current records had recycled master signatures into recurring inspection sheets, the problem was not internal embarrassment. It was coverage exposure. Ethan sat very still. Noah climbed onto the stool beside him. What did you find? Ethan touched the corner of the page. A reason they should have been more careful. Outside. The late sun turned the hangar door gold around the edges. Inside. Ethan opened a blank discrepancy report. Entered the aircraft tail numbers he had seen. Attached the master comparison. And typed the sentence that would change everything. Potential invalid reuse of original E. C. -17 Rev C certification signature across recurring inspection records. Request immediate external compliance review before further dispatch. His finger hovered over the send button. Not because he doubted the truth, because he knew what truth could cost before it protected anyone. It could cost a job. It could cost a lease. It could make powerful people say his name like a problem. Noah leaned against his arm. Mom would say, "Send it." Ethan closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he pressed send. Across the field, inside the glass offices of Carlisle Sky Charter, Ava Carlisle was preparing investor remarks about reliability, growth, and trust. Behind her, a digital wall showed 300 green aircraft status bars. By the end of the week, every one of those green bars would be questioned. But that night, in a tiny hangar everyone had laughed at, only one thing changed. The truth was no longer sitting in an archive box. It had been filed. By sunrise the next morning, Ethan Cole's discrepancy report had traveled farther than any private jet on Ava Carlisle's schedule. It moved first from the small computer inside Cole Aviation Repair to a compliance inbox at Halbrook Risk and Aviation Underwriters. From there, it was flagged by a junior analyst who almost sent it into routine review until she noticed the words original certification signature and recurring inspection records in the same paragraph. By 9:20, it had been forwarded to a senior auditor. By 10:15, a man named Daniel Mercer was standing in his office with the printed report in one hand, calling Carlisle Sky Charter with the kind of calm voice that made executives suddenly wish they had answered emails sooner. At the tiny hangar, Ethan did not know any of that yet. He was tightening the latch on an old inspection cabinet while Noah sat at the workbench, pretending to finish a math worksheet but really watching his father's phone. Every buzz made the boy look up. Ethan noticed but said nothing. He had slept maybe 3 hours. And even then his mind had kept returning to the same image, 3 different aircraft records. One identical pressure break in the signature line. And Ava Carlisle's face when Marco refused to let her take the envelope. Are they going to answer? Noah asked. They will. Ethan said. What if they say, you are wrong? Ethan looked at the archive box on the bench. Then, I will show them why I believed it. Noah's pencil tapped softly against the paper. What if they say you are right? That was the question Ethan had been avoiding. Being wrong would be embarrassing. Being right could shut down aircraft, cost people jobs, trigger lawsuits, and turn one small hangar into the center of a storm. The truth was supposed to protect people, but it rarely arrived politely. Ethan wiped his hands on a rag and looked at his son. Then everyone has to stop pretending. Just before noon, Tessa Grant came to the hangar alone, She did not arrive in one of Ava's black SUVs. She walked from the main complex with her tablet hugged against her chest and her hair pulled back like she had left in a hurry. Ethan saw her through the narrow window and told Noah to stay near the back office. Tessa stopped outside the open door, glanced once toward the security cameras on the maintenance complex, and stepped inside. "I should not be here," she said. "That usually means you brought something important." Tessa looked at the old shelves, the hanging tools, the blue toy airplane on the workbench, and finally the archive box. Yesterday she had stood behind Ava like a polished extension of the company. Today she looked like someone who had heard the building creak and realized she was inside it. "Your report triggered Halbrook," she said. "They requested a preliminary records hold." Ethan nodded slowly. "Good." "No," Tessa said. "Not good. Ava is calling it a malicious interference attempt. Legal is drafting a cease and desist. She wants your hangar locked out before the auditor arrives." Ethan's face did not change. That would look bad. She thinks looking strong is more important than looking careful. Noah appeared at the edge of the office door, still holding his pencil. Tessa saw him and softened for a second. "I am sorry," she said. And Ethan knew she was not talking only about the audit. "What did you bring?" he asked. Tessa opened her tablet, hesitated, then turned the screen toward him. It showed an internal email chain. The subject line read, "Standardized E. C. -17 Signoff packet for fleet-wide continuity." Ethan read the first message, then the second, then the reply from Ava's office, written in the clean corporate language people used when they wanted a dangerous order to sound harmless. "Do not delay dispatch for redundant legacy initials. Use existing master certification language where applicable. Ensure packets appear uniform before investor review." Ethan looked up. "Who wrote this?" Ava dictated the instruction. Her deputy general counsel cleaned up the wording. Tessa swallowed. "I pushed back once. I said recurring inspection sheets were not branding documents. She told me I was thinking like a clerk, not an operator." Ethan took the tablet but did not scroll farther. "Why bring it to me?" "Because Marco was right." Her voice dropped. "Once he logged your discrepancy, I checked older packets. It is not 3 aircraft. I found the same signature artifact in dozens before my access was limited. Maybe more. Maybe most of the CJ-9 fleet." Noah stepped fully out of the office. "Is that bad?" Tessa looked at him, then at Ethan. For the first time, she did not answer like an executive. "Yes," she said. "It is bad." A truck rolled past outside. All 3 of them turned toward the sound. 2 airport security vehicles had stopped near the old service road, and a facilities crew was looking at the hangar door with clipboards. Ethan watched one man point toward the electrical meter. Tessa whispered, "They're going to claim a safety access violation." Ethan set the tablet on the bench. "Noah, go into Mrs. Alvarez's shop." "No, Noah." The boy stood straighter. "You told me telling the truth early keeps people safe." Ethan held his son's eyes. There were moments when fatherhood was not about protecting a child from every hard thing. Sometimes it was about teaching him how to stand near one without becoming hard himself. Ethan nodded toward the side door. "Then stand behind me, not in front of me." The facilities supervisor reached the hangar first. "Mr. Cole, we have an order to inspect and secure this structure pending access review." Ethan stepped into the doorway. "By whose authority?" "Carlisle Field Administration. My lease is with the airport authority, not Carlisle Sky Charter." The supervisor looked uncomfortable. He had probably expected a man in a small hangar to fold quickly. "Sir, I just have a work order. Then you can leave a copy." Before the supervisor answered, another car pulled up behind the security vehicles. It was not black, not polished, not followed by cameras. Daniel Mercer stepped out in a navy suit with a leather folder under one arm. He was in his late 40s, gray at the temples. With the patient expression of a man paid to distrust convenient answers, "Who ordered a lockout on a site relevant to an active compliance review?" Daniel asked. No one answered. Ethan watched the supervisor's face change. He did not know Daniel, but he knew authority when he saw it. Daniel walked to the hangar door and looked at the sign. Cole Aviation Repair. Then he looked at Ethan. "Mr. Cole." "Yes." "Danielle Mercer. Halbrook Risk and Aviation Underwriters. I received your discrepancy report." He turned to the security crew. "No one removes, secures, cleans, copies, or destroys anything connected to the E.C. -17 records until I complete preliminary review. If Carlisle objects, they can call my office and explain why they attempted a site action after receiving a records hold." The supervisor looked at his clipboard. Then, at his crew, "We will stand down." As the vehicles pulled away, Noah let out the breath he had been holding. Tessa closed her eyes for 1 second, and Ethan understood that she had not been sure help would arrive in time. Daniel stepped inside the hangar. He did not mock the patched roof. He did not glance at the old coffee machine or the cracked concrete with contempt. He walked straight to the workbench where the archive box sat. And he looked at it the way a serious man looks at a serious thing. "Show me the master sheet," he said. For the next 2 hours, the tiny hangar became more important than Carlisle's glass offices. Daniel reviewed the original E.C. -17 Rev C certification package. Ethan explained only what needed explanation. Never more. He showed the pressure brake in his signature, the misplaced revision mark, the distribution list, the chain of custody language, and the insurance condition requiring live recurring inspection sign-off after specified mount intervals. Tessa provided screenshots of the internal email chain. Marco arrived halfway through, carrying a sealed copy of the 3 aircraft records he had logged before his access was downgraded. Daniel listened. He asked short questions. He took photographs. He sealed copies in evidence sleeves. And with every minute, the quiet inside the hangar grew heavier. Finally, Daniel placed the master sheet beside the copied records. "Mr. Ruiz," he said, "in your professional opinion, can these 3 recurring inspection records be treated as independent live sign-offs?" Marco looked at Ava's complex across the field before answering. "No." "Tessa, did senior leadership know standardized packets were being used for investor review?" Tessa's hand tightened around her tablet. "Yes." Daniel turned to Ethan. "Mr. Cole, are you willing to provide a revalidation statement confirming that the current Carlisle E.C. -17 packets maintain proper continuity?" Tessa looked sharply at Daniel. Marco's face hardened. Noah did not understand all the words, but he understood that the room had reached the edge of something. Ethan looked at the master sheet, then at the copies. There it was, the one thing Ava wanted from him. The thing her company could not manufacture once the original man was in the room. A statement. A signature. A line that would turn copied paper back into confidence long enough for investors to release money in jets to keep flying. "No," Ethan said. "Not without aircraft-by-aircraft verification." Daniel held his gaze. "You understand the impact." "I do. You understand Carlisle may claim damages. They can claim whatever they want. I will not certify what I did not inspect." Noah stared at his father, and something in the boy's expression changed. Not fear disappearing, something stronger arriving. By late afternoon, Ava Carlisle summoned everyone to the executive boardroom at the main complex. She called it a clarification meeting. Daniel called it a preliminary compliance conference. The board members called in from multiple cities. 2 investor representatives appeared on the large screen at the end of the room. Ava stood near the head of the table in a black suit now. No cream coat. No camera crew. No laughter. On the wall behind her, the operations display still showed the fleet map. hundreds of green markers across the country. Ethan entered with Daniel, Marco, and Tessa. Noah waited with Mrs. Alvarez in the lobby, but he could see through the glass partition. Ethan had wanted him away from the confrontation. Noah had asked to stay close enough to see whether Truth looked scared. Ethan had not known how to refuse that. Ava opened before anyone sat. This entire matter has been inflated by a disgruntled tenant with a personal interest in obstructing airport redevelopment. Daniel placed his folder on the table. Ms. Carlisle. This meeting concerns fleet compliance documentation and insurance continuity. Property redevelopment is irrelevant. It is relevant when the complainant has motive. Ethan said nothing. Ava looked at him. You have always wanted people to believe you walked away from corporate aviation because you were principled. Maybe you simply could not handle scale. Marco's eyes moved to Ethan, expecting a reaction. Ethan gave none. Ava had moved from mockery to character attack because the documents were no longer friendly to her. He understood the pattern. When facts stand up, pride starts throwing stones at the witness. Daniel opened the folder. We reviewed the original C. -17 Rev C master certification sheet retained by Mr. Fowles. Cole. The distribution language. 3 logged Carlisle aircraft records. Additional screenshots provided by Ms. Grant. And internal correspondence concerning standardized sign-off packets. One investor leaned closer on the screen. Are we discussing clerical duplication or airworthiness exposure? Potential airworthiness, compliance exposure. Daniel said. The room changed temperature. Ava cut in quickly. Potential. That word matters. There has been no incident. No failure. No aircraft event. And no passenger complaint. These jets are maintained by professionals. No one is saying your mechanics are unprofessional. Ethan said quietly. Ava turned. I did not ask you. But you are blaming the wrong people. The board chair, an older woman named Miriam Hale, looked at him. Mr. Cole. Explain in plain English. Ethan stepped to the display where Daniel had placed the enlarged signatures side by side. This is not about polish. It is not about whether the aircraft look clean or whether the mechanics work hard. This signature here was part of an original certification package in 2018. It confirmed the design and inspection requirements for a retrofit installed across parts of the fleet. But these later records use the same signature as if it were a live, recurring inspection sign-off. Same pressure brake. Same scan artifact. Same misplaced revision code. That means the paper may say checked when the aircraft-by-aircraft check was not actually documented. Miriam looked at the display for a long moment. Could the aircraft still be physically safe? Yes. Ethan said, some may be. Maybe many are. But safe is not something you assume because the paperwork is convenient. You inspect. You verify. Then you sign. Daniel nodded once. Halbrook's concern is not that every aircraft is unsafe. It is that Carlisle cannot currently demonstrate compliance continuity for the affected C. -17 fleet population. Ava took one step forward. Then we solve that now. Mr. Cole is here. He can sign a revalidation statement confirming the original package remains applicable while our team completes review. Tessa looked at her in disbelief. Ava ignored her. We will compensate him. Generously. Give him a consultant agreement. Backdate, nothing. Make it clean. He signs today. Halbrook maintains coverage. And we review internally without disrupting hundreds of clients. Daniel's face remained neutral. A blanket revalidation without aircraft-by-aircraft verification would not resolve my concern. It would if the original signatory confirms continuity. Everyone looked at Ethan. For a few seconds, he could hear almost nothing except the low hum of the boardroom display. He thought of the tiny hangar, the 14-day notice, the bills under the magnet, Noah watching through the glass. Lena at the kitchen table, thinner than she should have been, saying, "If you know something is not safe, do not let money rename it." Ava slid a document across the table. Her legal team had prepared it fast. Consultant revalidation statement. Signature line at the bottom. Ethan Cole. There, Ava said. Softer now. Almost kind. You wanted to matter. Matter responsibly. Sign this, and I will personally guarantee your hangar remains open. I will even move your operation into a better facility. Noah watched from the lobby. His blue toy airplane held against the glass. Ethan picked up the document. He read it once. The room waited. Ava's face relaxed by a fraction, because she mistook careful reading for temptation. Then Ethan set the document back down unsigned. No. The word did not echo, but it seemed to remove every other sound from the room. Ava stared at him. Excuse me. I will consult. I will inspect. I will help your mechanics verify every affected aircraft. But I will not sign a statement saying records are continuous when the records in front of us show they are not. Ava's voice sharpened. Do you understand what you are doing to 300 aircraft? Ethan looked at the fleet map behind her. I am not doing this to them. Your refusal grounds them. No, Ethan said. The false paperwork grounds them. My signature just refuses to lie for it. The room went silent. Not uncomfortable quiet. Not polite quiet. The deep kind of silence that arrives when powerful people realize the smallest person in the room has said the sentence everyone else was avoiding. Marco lowered his eyes. Tessa breathed out shakily. Miriam Hale on the board screen looked from Ethan to Ava, and her expression hardened into something official. Daniel closed his folder. Based on the refusal of the original signatory to validate continuity, the documented duplication indicators, and internal correspondence, Halbrook cannot maintain active dispatch coverage for the affected E.C. -17 aircraft population until individual compliance verification is completed. One investor said, "How many aircraft are affected?" Tessa answered before Ava could. Potentially all CJ-9 and CJ-9X aircraft in the Carlisle Charter Operating Group. The operations director on the far end whispered, "That is the entire active private fleet." Daniel looked at the screen. Pending final tail number reconciliation. Halbrook recommends immediate fleet hold. On the wall, the green markers still glowed. 300 private jets. 300 symbols of Ava Carlisle's reach. 300 aircraft that had looked untouchable from the door of a tiny hangar. Ava's face went pale. You cannot ground my fleet on a recommendation. Daniel's voice stayed calm. Without coverage continuity. They cannot dispatch under your current charter contracts. Miriam Hale removed her glasses. Ava, did you authorize standardized sign-off packets for investor review? Ava did not answer quickly enough. Tessa set her tablet on the table and turned it toward the board. I preserved the email chain. That was the second silence. Smaller. Sharper. Final. The investor representative spoke from the screen. We are suspending release of expansion capital pending audit outcome. Miriam nodded once. The decision already forming. Effective immediately. Operational authority transfers to an interim compliance committee. Miss Grant will cooperate with Halbrook. Mr. Ruiz will lead aircraft verification under external supervision. She looked at Ethan. Mr. Cole, if you are willing, we would like to retain you as an independent consultant. Written agreement. Full liability protection. Emergency review compensation. No backdating. No pressure to certify anything you have not verified. Ethan looked at Daniel. Daniel gave a small nod, as if to say, that is how the sentence should have sounded from the beginning. I will review a written agreement. Ethan said, and I want Marco's team protected from retaliation. Marco looked up. Miriam answered. Granted. Ava gripped the back of a chair. For the first time since she had arrived at Ethan's hangar, she seemed unsure what to do with her hands. "You are letting a man from a shed dictate fleet operations." Miriam's eyes sharpened. "No. We are letting documentation, insurance, and airworthiness dictate fleet operations. Something you should have done before this room became necessary." By evening, the operations wall changed. The green markers turned amber, then red, then gray as dispatch holds were entered by tail number. Flights were postponed. Clients were called. Pilots were reassigned to verification support. Maintenance bays filled with aircraft that had been too busy earning money to sit still long enough for truth. No one said Ethan had grounded them. Not officially. But everyone knew one unsigned line had stopped what money had tried to rush. Outside the boardroom, Noah ran to his father but stopped just before hugging him, as if he suddenly saw that Ethan was tired and a way cheering would not fix. Ethan knelt, and Noah stepped into his arms. "Did you beat her?" Noah asked. Ethan held him close. "No." Noah pulled back. But her planes stopped. They stopped because people need to check them properly. "So you won." Ethan looked through the glass at the boardroom where Ava stood alone while Daniel and Miriam reviewed the first audit order. "We told the truth," he said. "That is better than winning." 3 days later, Cole Aviation Repair looked almost the same from the outside. The paint was still peeling. The roof still needed work. The old sliding door still complained when Ethan opened it at dawn. But there were new things now. A formal lease extension from the airport authority lay signed on the workbench. A consultant agreement from the compliance committee sat beside it. Clean and specific payment terms. Liability protection. No forced certification. Board witness. And independent authority to stop work if records were incomplete. The emergency review fee would clear Ethan's old medical debt. The 3-year advisory contract, if completed, would keep the hangar alive. Marco's team arrived first with coffee and sealed records. Tessa came next, no longer carrying herself like Ava's shadow. Daniel Mercer walked in behind them and placed the first verified aircraft packet on the bench. Noah stood on a stool and taped his blue toy airplane to the shelf above the archive box. Ethan watched him press the tape down carefully. "Is that where it goes?" Ethan asked. Noah nodded. "So people know this hangar is not small." Ethan smiled faintly. "It is still small." "No," Noah said, looking around at the old tools, the records, the people waiting respectfully by the door. "It is just quiet." Ethan had to look away for a moment. Near the work lamp, the original E.C. -17 master sheet rested inside a clear protective sleeve. He thought of Lena only once. Not as a wound this time, but as a steady voice from a life that had taught him what courage cost before it saved anyone. Do not let money rename what is not safe. He had not. And because he had not, 300 aircraft waited on truth instead of pride. A month later, the first verified jet returned to service with a clean inspection packet and real signatures from real hands. Carlisle Sky Charter issued a public correction. Careful but unmistakable. Ava Carlisle resigned from operational control after the board's review found that investor presentation deadlines had been allowed to override compliance judgment. She remained wealthy, but she no longer stood between safety records and the people who needed them. Tessa became interim operations chief. Marco's mechanics kept their jobs. Ethan stayed independent. He did not move into a glass facility. He did not buy a mansion. He did not turn cruel because cruelty had once stood in front of his son and called their life a shed. Instead, he repainted the old sign above the door. Cole Aviation Repair. Same words. Cleaner letters. On the morning the paint dried, Noah stood beside him with his backpack on. "Ready for school?" "Dad," he said. When she said this was a shed, did it hurt? Ethan looked at the hangar, at the open door, at the sunlight touching the concrete floor where the archive box sat under the bench. A little. Why didn't you yell? Because yelling would not have made her wrong. Noah thought about that. Then looked up. The truth did. Ethan placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Across the field, jets waited in orderly lines. Not as trophies anymore, but as machines that required care, humility, and honest hands. The tiny hangar stood in their shadow. Still patched. Still plain. Still easy to underestimate from a distance. But no one at Carlisle Executive Field laughed at it now. They had seen a shed. Ethan had seen responsibility. They had seen a poor single dad at the edge of the runway. He had been the one man who refused to let a signature become a lie. And in the end, his son understood what the whole airport had been forced to learn. A place does not have to be large to hold the truth, and a quiet man does not have to raise his voice to bring an empire to a stop.